So welcome to the next climbing mini guide, and after successfully tying into the rope, the climber is ready to go, but now we need to look at the next most important link in the safety chain of climbing, and that is belaying. So today our mini guide is on belay mastery. So we need to decide what type of belay device we're going to use, and belay devices are generally divided into two main groups: the active type and the passive type. Active belay devices are mechanical by design, and they grab the rope if tension is applied to it, a bit like a seat belt in a car. And then passive devices are simple tubes of metal where the rope is fed through the tube and then round a carabiner, and when tension is applied to the rope, the twist in the rope through the carabiner creates a lock on the rope. And for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to be using a passive tube type belay device. So whatever type of belay device we use, it's really important that we understand how to use it correctly. And we can do our research and we can watch some films on the internet to make sure that we know how it works properly. But I think actually if we're starting off learning how to belay, that a passive device is the best way to start, because they tend to be safer in the hands of a novice than an active device that is more complicated and that might need a little bit more instruction to be able to use successfully. So having chosen the belay device that we're going to use, and in this case I'm going to use a passive device, it's important to start thinking about getting ourselves set up for belaying. So you'll notice that I'll put my helmet on. In certain situations at a climbing wall you might want to put a helmet on for belaying. If you're belaying a beginner, for example, that would be a good reason to put a helmet on while you're belaying, in case they fall off the wall, legs flying about. You want to make sure that you're protecting your head at all times. I'm then going to attach the belay device to my harness, and the carabiner is currently open, so I'm going to attach the carabiner to my harness, but I'm not going to do it up yet, and that's because I need to feed the rope through the belay device. So I'm going to grab the rope and I'm going to make a loop or a bite in the rope, and I'm going to feed it through the belay device like this. And at this point I'm going to screw up the gate on the carabiner, and I'm just going to test it by squeezing the gate, and if I get that click and the gate doesn't open, I know that that is now safe. Now at this point it's worth describing the two strands of the rope that are important to us here. The live end of the rope is the end of the rope that goes from the carabiner up to the top of the climbing wall to the anchors and down to the climber. The dead end of the rope is the bit that looks slack and it's hanging down to the floor. And it's this end of the rope that we're most interested in. It's unfortunate that climbers call this the dead end of the rope in a way. This is not a word that we want to use too often in climbing, but at the same time it gives us an idea that this end of the rope is the most important end for us belayers. And for that reason we are never going to let go of the dead end of the rope while the climber is attached to the rope. So we must always remember to keep positive control on the dead end of the rope when we're belaying. So now that we're set up and ready to belay, we just need to do some basic checks to make sure that everything is safe before the climber climbs. And we use the acronym ABC to help us to make sure that we run through those checks effectively. And the A is for anchors, and for this we're going to look at the top of the climbing wall, and we're going to check to make sure that the rope is through the carabiners at the top of the climbing wall, and that we can make sure that the carabiners are locked. And we should be able to do a visual check to make sure that that's the case. We might also want to be able to just pull on both strands of the live end of the rope and just give that a bit of a tug and make sure that that's secure at the top. So that's A for anchor. B is for belayer. So what am I checking here? I'm checking to make sure that I have all my safety equipment in place and on correctly. So I've got my helmet on starting at the top. My harness is done up correctly. The belay device and carabiner are correctly attached to my harness, and I'm just going to check that the gate is done up on the carabiner again. I've got positive control of the dead end of the rope, and the rope is fed correctly through the device, through to the live end of the rope and to the climber, which is where our C comes in. C for climber, again starting at the top, helmet on correctly, harness. I'm checking to make sure that the buckles are done up correctly on this harness, and also that the climber is tied in correctly, that she's tied in correctly. So the figure of 8 is rethreaded correctly, there is a correct stopper knot on, and that all looks nice and neat. And as we know, a neat knot is a happy knot. So we've run through our checks and the climber is ready to climb, and I'm ready to safely belay her as she starts to climb up the climbing wall. In order to start that process off, we need to use some recognised climbing calls or climbing commands, and this really makes sure that we both know what each other is doing at every stage in the sequence. So I'm going to use those commands now, and then I'm going to start pulling the rope through my belay device, and I'll describe to you how I'm going to do that in a second. So climb when you're ready.
Climbing now.
Okay. So I'm feeding it through using a sequence known as V knee 1 2 3, and this is an easy way to remember how we feed the rope through the belay device. We make a V shape by pulling the dead end of the rope through, and we can assist it by pulling down on the live end of the rope, and that makes a V shape in the rope, as you can see. And then I'm going to lock it off by bringing the dead end down to my knee, and then I'm going to move my hands up the dead end of the rope by counting 1 2 3. And this is a good way of remembering how we belay successfully. So as the climber is climbing up the wall and I'm taking slack out of the rope, V, knee, 1 2 3. And it's a good idea when we're belaying a climbing wall to make sure that we're quite close to the wall itself. And this is in case the climber falls. If we're standing away from the wall with tension on the rope, we're obviously going to be brought into the wall. Ideally, we don't want to put one of our hands out. We're better off keeping control of the dead end of the rope with both hands. But we might want to brace ourselves with a shoulder against the wall. And for this reason, we also want to make sure that our belaying hand on the dead end of the rope is away from the climbing. So as we're belaying, it's possible, of course, that the climber is going to fall. And at that point, we need to make sure that in a split second, we've locked off the dead end of the rope. We don't need to put too much pressure on the dead end of the rope to stop a fall. Once the climber's back on the wall and climbing successfully again, obviously we can then start our sequence of belaying.
That's me!
Okay, so our climber is now at the top of the wall, and before I start lowering her down, I just need to make sure I've taken all of the slack out of the rope, and I've got both hands on the dead end of the rope, ready for her to sit back in your harness and get both hands on the knot in front of you, put your feet up on the wall and get ready to come down. So again, I'm communicating clearly what I want the climber to do, and I'm now going to start lowering her down the wall. And you can see that I'm positively controlling the rope from one hand to the other. And at every point in the sequence, I've got one hand firmly on the rope. And if at any stage I need to lock the rope off, I can just put a bit of downward pressure onto the dead end of the rope and the climber will stop where they are. So after successfully tying into the rope, the next most important thing to get right is belaying. Belaying is complicated, it's a technical skill and it involves a lot of equipment. But if we run through a sequence in our minds continually while we're belaying, we are going to get it right every time. And that is, check, make sure everything is correct at all times. Observe, watch what's going on, react to what you see, and communicate successfully with your climbing partner. Check, observe, react, communicate. Thank you for watching this climbing mini guide on belay mastery.